Should you use GetService or GetRequiredService in IServiceProvider? Before we answer that question, we need to inject the IServiceProvider instance into this controller and then store the reference to it in a private read-only field. From there, we can use that instance to either call GetService to resolve a service from dependency injection or GetRequiredService. You can also do the same with keyed services as well, so you can either call the GetKeyedService or the GetRequiredKeyedService. You can use the service provider instance, or in a controller you can also call http context.requestServices and it will do the same thing. And it's a similar story if you use an eraser page or a view. In this razor view, we're injecting the IServiceProvider into it, and we're calling either the GetService or GetRequiredService if we're resolving a service from dependency injection, or if we're resolving a keyed service, we either call the GetKeyedService or the GetRequiredKeyedService. You can use the service provider, or you can also call viewContext.http context.requestServices, and it will do the same thing. But what's the difference between GetService and GetRequiredService? Alternatively, what's the difference between GetKeyedService and GetRequiredKeyedService? Before we answer those questions, remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like for the video. And let me know in the YouTube comments when you use the IServiceProvider type. Now let's find out the differences between those methods. Regardless of whether you use the GetService or the GetRequiredService method, as long as you've registered the service in dependency injection, it will resolve. It's the same story with the GetKeyedService or the GetRequiredKeyedService. As long as it's registered, it will resolve. The difference being is when you don't register the service. Here we're trying to resolve the I category not added service. If we go to program.cs, there's no sign of the I category not added service being added as part of dependency injection. So what's going to happen when we run this endpoint? Nothing is being outputted for the GetService or GetKeyedService. And the reason being is that if the service is not registered in dependency injection, when we call either GetService or GetKeyedService, it will just return null. And because we're using the null conditional operator to get the category type, because it's null, it will return null. It's a different story though if you're either using the GetRequiredService or GetRequiredKeyedService. Let's run these endpoints and see what gets outputted. We get this exception thrown saying no service for type I category not added service has been registered. And it's also the same story for the keyed service. You should use the required methods unless you know that the services are not going to be registered, like if they're disabled with a feature flag. You can download the code example for this tutorial by going to roundthecode.com/examples. There's also a link for it in the YouTube video description. You can inject the IServiceProvider into minimal APIs and middleware. But first, let's see how we do it with web APIs. Injecting the IServiceProvider into a web API controller is exactly the same as what we showed you with the MVC controller earlier. We inject the IServiceProvider into the constructor's parameter, and then we store a reference to it in a private read-only field. From there, we can use that reference to resolve services. You can also use the http context.requestServices to do exactly the same thing. If we have a look at the API response, it's returning an ID of 2 and a name of computers, and it's doing it for each of the properties that we're returning as part of the response. If we have a look at the API endpoint, it's resolving a service of iCategory service and called in the getCategory type with a parameter of 2. Doing that for the GetService and GetRequiredService. With the keyed service, it's trying to resolve a service of iCategory storage service with a key of computers, and then it's trying to get the types property with a single all default value with the ID being 2. Looking in program.cs, we're registering a service with iCategory service with an implementation of category service. We're also registering a key service with the service of iCategory storage service and an implementation of category computer storage service with a key of computers. The category service is injecting a type of iCategory storage service with a key of computers. It's then being used in this method here, the getCategory type, passing in an ID, and we're getting the types from the category storage service.types. If we have a look at the category storage service, we've got this types property, and we can see that the category type is computers. You can also inject the service directly into the Web API endpoint. So you just use it as a parameter, you get the type and you give it a name of service provider, then you can use it throughout that method. You can inject services into minimal APIs by injecting the services as parameters in the endpoint method. Let's see how we do that. You inject the IServiceProvider after the root like this, and then you can use it throughout the method. Alternatively, you can inject the HTTP context into your endpoint method, and then you can use the HTTP context.request services. So as we've removed the IServiceProvider injection, we need to replace it for each of them. In middleware, if you inject the IServiceProvider type using a constructor's parameter, you'll come across some issues which we'll demonstrate. With this middleware class, we're doing just that. We're injecting the IServiceProvider into the constructor's parameter, and we're storing a reference to it with a private read-only field. We're then using it as part of the invoke async method. But what's going to happen when we run our application? We get this exception saying cannot resolve scope service iCategory service from root provider. And the reason being is that the IServiceProvider is registered with a scope service lifetime. However, middleware classes are registered with a single lifetime instance, meaning it can't resolve the scope service. And the way we can resolve this is that we remove the service provider injection from the constructor's parameter, and we can inject it as part of the invoke async method. So we'll do just that. We'll inject the IServiceProvider instance and then replace the references within the invoke async method. And that will resolve it for us. It can also be used with primary constructors. This is where you inject the service as part of the class declaration. We're injecting the IServiceProvider and we're using it throughout the class in different methods. It's also possible to resolve services before the application is run. This is how you do it. We've registered these services here as singleton service lifetimes. After the application has been built, we can call app.services and we can resolve the services like this. We've also registered this scope service lifetime as well. We try to do the same thing, so if we change that to category service, and we try to resolve the service by getting the iCategory service type and run the application, it throws this exception saying cannot resolve scope service iCategory service from root provider. The reason being is that by doing it this way, we can only resolve singleton service lifetime instances. If we need to resolve a scope service lifetime before the application is run, we first need to get the instance of the iService scope factory, create a new scope, and then we can resolve that service as part of the scope. The IServiceProvider type is good if you don't know if a service is going to be registered or you've got multiple services that you need to resolve. Now we talked about the iService scope factory type and how you can use it to create a new scope. Watch this video next where you'll learn how to use it with background tasks and multi-threading. You can download the code example for this tutorial by going to roundthecode.com/examples. There's also a link for it in the YouTube video description. Leave any comments that you have about the IServiceProvider type and I'll see you on the next video.